Water, which is too pure, has no fish. Ts'ai Ken T'an. Good evening, folks. So I've decided that Monday will be my dedicated fishing talk video live stream. There's always so much to talk about and discuss. I mean, Eagle playing at anchor. I was just watching his video. Was it his video? Yes, it was his video. Why are these police officers covering themselves in blood? Now, that's an interesting one. I'll have to talk with that. There is a video that I watched yesterday. Hey, there's a guy named Fish Guy on the show. Hey, how's it going? So, anyways, I'll probably cover that tomorrow. So, in this thing, we can talk about everything regarding fishing. We could just talk about actually fishing. We could talk about some of the things that we come across as people who literally fish, and then there's also the figurative talking of fish, if you want to talk about spirituality type of things. Now, the description box on YouTube and on Vim.tv contain links on how to come in and chat on Zoom. So if you want to come in and talk, you can. And otherwise, you can just sit back and listen and watch. I am just going to talk, really, until people come in, and then I'm done. Hopefully, I don't have to do this every Monday and just repeat myself. I do have probably hundreds of hours of fishing videos I could probably share with people. Some of you who are subscribed, you will know that I do upload fishing videos on occasion, but because I have so much fishing videos, and usually a lot of the fishing is usually from the same place, and you know, it's not like I'm getting a lot of fish. Like big fish. I'm just getting a lot of fish. And of course, I know some people who will just watch fishing videos just to watch someone fish. Same place, same type of fish. They're not big at all, so it doesn't size doesn't necessarily matter with fishing. But if you want to take home and eat it, sometimes it can. Fish guy, did somebody caught an extinct fish supposed to be gone like a long time ago? A couple of fish like that. Yeah, I know there's lots of fish. There's one for the Zoom link, Fish guy. You can go ahead and basically right after the quotes, there's a join Zoom meeting. Click on that link, it'll install Zoom, and then you can come on in and join me. And that reminds me, I should make sure that chime occurs when someone comes in. I guess I will start off by just kind of giving you my introduction and reintroduction to fishing. So I originally started fishing as a kid. I remember I can't remember if it was, I remember it was my father. So I was born in Houston, Texas. We used to go to Galveston a lot. Now in Galveston, my father did two things. He mostly crabbed for crabs. It was on these big jetties, basically big rocks that go kind of into the water. So we're in Galveston and we're catching a lot of crabs because he put those crab traps out. And while he's crabbing, he's fishing. I can't remember what type of fish he caught, but I think most of it was flounder. But I'm not 100% sure. I was really little. I just remember mostly the crabs, catching the crabs, having some of them go back in the water. We'll get the little ones, put them back, and big ones my father would grab and put in the bucket or the cooler. But I didn't really fish. I was just there kind of enjoying it. Then we moved over to Washington State. where we lived in Fairway, Washington. Oh, actually, before that, me and my brother visited with my cousins, which my cousins also lived in Houston at that time. But their father, their biological father, my uncle-in-law, we'd go to Bainbridge Island in Washington State. And I remember that's when I actually started fishing with the fishing rod. And he would grab a big bucket, fill it up with seawater. We would go on these boating piers, and he would just go underneath the pier, just kind of leaning over, reach out, and he would just tear apart or cut or knife parts of these tube worms. So there's just these little big tubes. They're just kind of all mangled and jumbled. Maybe I can get a visual so you guys can see it. So just give me a second here. Wow. Yeah. Cool. Alvin, Texas. So let's see. Let's see images. I kind of like these in a way, not quite. The thing is, the last couple of times I went, they're kind of like this. The last couple of times I went to Washington State or any type of place, really, I would actually look under the piers just to see if I could find tube worms. You know what? I can never find tube worms again. And they're kind of like these, not quite. I wish I could find exactly. What is that? They're really big and bloody, and they've got these really hairy things at the ends of their bodies, and those work like a charm. I wish I could find them. I mean, they, like, the fish would just go crazy on them. They just loved them. I think it's because they're hard to get at. Because anytime there's fish that try to get them, the tube worms would just go back inside the safety of their tube, and they wouldn't be eaten. But flounder love them. Let's see. Does this have anything? No, I guess not. Kind of like this, maybe. Gosh, I wonder if just the change in climate, I mean, there's changes in climate regardless if it's man-made or not, but still, just did something to all these. Maybe they're not coincidences, fish guy. All right, so we'd get these tube worms and we would use them as bait. And at that time, I think I was anywhere from 4 to 8. I can't remember exactly, because it was multiple times where we'd go and visit, and I always used to enjoy it. And what would happen, and there you go. So what would happen is, anyways, let's go back, is we would use it, go out to fishing pier, and just start fishing. We would use the tube worms as bait. We would cut them up because the tube worms just long. I mean, I don't know how long they were, but we would just cut them up in sections and use them as bait for flounder. And we would catch a lot of flounder. And, once we caught them, basically, our uncle, me and my brother, our uncle would handle it. And we would take it home. He would cook it up, and it was good. So that was kind of my first, I think, real fishing that I did. And then as I got older, me and my father, my brother, we would go out and fish for, I think, trout. I always thought it was salmon, but my brother told me it was trout. And for me, it was boring because we wouldn't catch very many. And maybe it was just my father. uh, and just either I don't know. It was boring for me, and then it would rain a lot in Washington State. It would just rain so much that it get cold, and I'd rather just go inside the car and play Game Boy, which is funny because that's what my daughter likes to do when we go fishing. Fish guy, I'm Jose, ex Oakley guy, ex flat earther. I'm using this account because of the stream title. Okay. So I would remember that, and I don't remember eating the trout way back then. Not really. Now, I think that was the extent of my fishing. And then I got married. We're gonna have my wife has our first kid. Is she Leela, our daughter? She's now 6. So I started fishing probably 7 years ago. Just to get a little bit more experience as to fishing, as how to fish, because what I wanted to do. Me and my wife were vegetarians at that time. Now we call ourselves huntitarians or fishitarians. I don't know, pescatarians. So basically, we eat animals if we fish or hunt for them ourselves, catch them, kill them, cook them. At least one of us, and basically that's just me. So I just had to kind of reintroduce myself. And what's great is that many YouTube videos pretty much kind of teach you how to fish. Now I have a one of the benefits of fishing later in life is that you're just learning from everyone else. A lot of people, probably in my Generation X, they have all learned from their father, or someone from their family. So you learn a lot of good habits and bad habits as you grow up, unless you explore on your own, talk to other people who fish. Fishermen typically like to talk. I usually don't. I'm so focused on fishing. I usually don't talk unless someone else that's fishing is also pretty talkative. Eagle playing anchor, deep sea fishing in Channel Islands is what you need. Come out, California. I'll take you. I would love fishing out in California. So if I ever go to California, I'll take you up on that offer. My cousin, who's a music video director, who unfriended me on Facebook because I started diving into occult stuff. Yeah, funny story on that one. But he always told me, come out to LA. Yeah, I think you'd love it. And it's like, LA's not my type of thing. If I go to California, I've been to California when I was in the Navy. I was in San Diego, San Francisco, and that's it. But they're pretty big. They're great. It was kind of nice. I think it's a little too trendy or something. I would just love just going out fishing, just West Coast. You an X-Men? Wow, I don't know what that means. So the great thing about being growing up in this generation, at least if you want to look on the bright side, is that you can learn from a variety of sources on how to fish and what works, what doesn't. For me, I usually test things out. I'll go out fishing on days where I know I'm not going to probably catch a fish. But what I'm trying to do is try to catch a fish and just find out what works and what doesn't. And sometimes if I don't catch a fish, I'm just wondering, why am I not able to catch a fish? What's going on? There's one day I remember in Walden Pond. I think it might have been 6 years ago, so it was probably a year after I started to catch fish. I went out fishing with someone I knew for the first time, I think, or second. It might have been Vil, who I met at Walden Pond. We were fishing, and we went all the way around the Walden Pond, just fishing at several spots, and there's just flies everywhere, and just trout were just jumping out of water, just high, low. It is just, if no one had ever gone to Walden Pond before and they saw what we saw, they would thought that the Walden Pond was teeming with fish, with trout. But that's not the case. There's just so many flies out that hatched that the trout were just going wild in a feeding frenzy. So we tried using everything. I even tried using flies. They wouldn't even go for flies because there's just so many flies out there. It's like, well, my fly ain't gonna make any difference. The fish are just gonna go and get whatever fly. So that day was a bad day to fish. I wouldn't go out in days where the fish just have plentiful food to eat. At least with not with a rod. Maybe if you want to use a net or something, but that's probably illegal. But if you are starving and you need food and there's just fish crawling out of the water, just jumping out of the water, and you're starving and you're not catching fish with the rod, yeah, just get a net and you'll catch a lot, I'm sure. Okay. Eagle Planning Anchor was stationed at Camp Pendleton. A lot of ex-military guys, huh? All right, so what I will start off with is the first thing I learned. I think that was important for me to start fishing on my own. Was fishing knots. I learned a lot of fishing knots, but all I will tell you is learn 3 varied fishing knots. And the one that I use the most, and why I think it's the best versatile knot, anyone could say any knot is the best knot. But I mean, they all have uses. Otherwise, there wouldn't be use for having that specific knot. I use the uni knot. The great thing about the uni knot, and what I do is I make sure I wrap it around six times, so you can see it going once, twice, 3. So I do that 6 times, and then an important thing to do. I know this is just an illustration; it's not actual fishing line. Is you want to wet the fishing line, and so there's 3 types of fishing line to use. One is braid, which doesn't stretch at all, but it's not transparent. Then you've got fluorocarbon, which is probably a little bit more. It's stretchy, but it's pretty. Fish will have a hard time seeing it. Fish that have good vision, typically trout. And then there's monofilament, which is similar to fluorocarbon, but it's usually if fish can probably see it a little bit, and it's a mix. It really doesn't matter, in my opinion. I've fished with monofilament and fluorocarbon. I found really no difference. My preference is for fluorocarbon. The only time I typically use braid is I will use braid when I'm fishing out at sea, or I am fishing with a lure, or something that I'm just basically reeling it in. And what I do is I use a double uni knot. So basically I tie a leader, which is basically whatever size rod that you have, just a little bit short of that, I use as a leader, because that way when you reel it all the way in and you cast it, it's not gonna create like a complicated knot when you go ahead and release the line, or cast your rod line out. So the uni knot is very versatile. You can tie your line to a hook, to a fishing hook. You can tie a line to another line, so either a mono or a fluorocarbon line to a braid. And if you're going to fly fish, you're going to need to know that too. So that is, the uni knot is a very, very great knot to know. It's one of my most used knots. Just make sure you wet the line before you get that small small end. Once you pull that end, you want to make sure you spit or water it down, whatever, just so it lines up smoothly. And then once you do that, pull the long end, not the loop end, the long end. Pull that tight too, and there you go. Just snip off the little end at the bottom, and you're good to go. And the uni knot is my most used knot, most versatile knot, I would say. There's plenty of knots that I still use, and I don't remember like a lot of the names for it. Like I use the alpine butterfly loop a lot, the double fisherman, square knot, clove hitch, bowline knot, but don't worry about all those. I think it's good for you to explore, and definitely have it in your fishing knot memory, right? The uni knot should be your number one knot to know, in my opinion, because it's just so versatile. I've never had any time where the knot itself gave way when I'm reeling in any type of fish. It's very sturdy. It doesn't break, and it's very, very versatile again. Now, the second knot I would say that I use the most, even though I don't really use it a lot. I mean, just because the uni knot is what I use the most. Let me see if I could find it. Is the arbor knot. Now, the arbor knot, you don't I mean, there's a couple ways of utilizing the arbor knot, but it's just kind of like a hangman's noose in a way. It's very simple. What's useful for this is to easily remove the knot. But remember, if you pull on that small end, you're going to loosen the knot, but on the main line, as long as you're pulling on that, it's not going to give way. I don't typically use it on my fishing hooks, but what I do use it on is attaching the leader on a now the leader is going to be different from rod fishing and fly fishing. So typically, or tenkara rod fishing. So tenkara rods or fly fishing, what I would do is I would attach the actually, fly fishing is different. Tenkara rods, sorry. Speaking specifically on tenkara rods, I would use this knot in order to go ahead and attach my line to the tenkara rod, and this makes it easy to take out. But you know, it's I'm never gonna pull that little end to loosen the knot. So you know, it's just a good knot to use in a pinch. It's really easy to tie, and it's I use it on a lot of occasions, I would say, even when I'm not fishing. But when I'm spooling my reel, so that's putting your fishing line onto your reel on a fishing rod, I start off with this. I mean, the arbor knot is a pretty good line. I do not use it to tie it to my fishing hook. I use the uni knot, but it is one of my 3 most used knots, I would say, not just for fishing, but also in fishing. Now, the third most knot that I use is I use the dropper loop knot, but I don't really use it as much. What I do use a lot is the Palomar knot. I would say this is the third most knot that you should learn, and it's really easy. I think that's the really important part, that it's really easy. And why it's useful as a knot to learn, well, one, if you don't want to use the uni knot, you can use this knot to tie a fishing line to a fishing hook. It's pretty strong. The line hasn't broke, but typically what I use this for is if I don't have like a there's a it's a T, what's it called, a swivel is something that you would attach your fishing line to a leader or something. But basically, if you don't have like a T swivel, if you want to put a second fishing hook on your main line, a Palomar knot is something that I highly recommend using. And you can make it kind of go out further as well. Basically, it's just getting, all you have to do is you fold your line, put that fold through the hoop, you just tie it around once, and then with the end you go over the hook and you tighten it. It's one of the easiest knots to do. Because I love the uni knot so much, I don't use the Palomar knot. But if I'm fishing with the second line and I don't have a T swivel, I use a Palomar knot. It's very useful. Also, so three knots to know. Okay, the uni knot, the arbor knot, and the Palomar knot. Those are the three fishing knots that I use, and that's it. I mean, I could use more, but that's pretty much what I use. I've learned pretty much almost, I'd say 90% of these knots I learned and I've used, but I've gotten to the point where I just tie my knots so quick, and like if I need to tie up a rig on my fishing rod, I mean, I'm ready and done in like half a minute. I got my leader on it, my swivel, my weight, and my knots are all in place, and I'm ready to go. So, three knots that are very important to know. Now, the second thing I would say is the type of rigging that you use when you're fishing. My main rig is called the Carolina rig. It's what I use for trout fishing, and I pretty much use it for a lot of types of fishing. Now, this is a little bit different than what most people would use it for. The reason why it works so great for trout fishing is trout don't fish at the very bottom. Very rarely will they fish or eat things from off the bottom floor of their habitat. They're usually typically looking at swimming against the current, just kind of looking and seeing what comes their way. They don't really want to expend a lot of energy. They kind of know that they've got a good secure hiding spot to run into if they see a big fish coming at them, and so they're typically looking upwards for food. Sometimes when they don't have a lot of food that are above them, what they'll do is they'll look at the bottom if they see any movement, and that would sometimes typically be something like a crawfish or something like that. So the first rigging that I used, and it's useful for many other things than trout fishing. But basically, you put your weight on the end of your line, and bullet weights is what I use. I don't use lead weights. Sometimes in a pinch, when all my what's the heavy weights? There's a weight that's not toxic, that's non-lead, and it's heavier than lead, that I use all the time, and I can't think of it right now. If I remember it, I'll let you know. But basically, put on your bullet weight, and then a swivel. It doesn't have to be a swivel. I don't use a buffered bead. I have before, but I just realized I never need to use it, really. I never had a problem with the bullet weight affecting the swivel ring. And that's what you use, the glass, or just a buffered bead. It doesn't have to be glass. It can be made out of plastic, and a lot of them are made out of plastic these days. Hi, Grant Jarvis. So I put on bullet weight. It doesn't have to be. It just lets you cast further, and when you reel it in, it's a lot less drag resistance. You don't need a glass buffer bead or a plastic bead. Don't worry about that. You do need a very dependable macro swivel, or just any swivel. I use a barrel swivel typically, or a T-ring swivel. That's it. I don't even bother with the ones where you could kind of release and a quick release for your swivels. Those are typically weaker. I don't recommend it. As a beginner, what they have in a lot of stores are your little leaders that are like 6 inches, and they have the hook already tied with like probably the size of the line is like it's heavier than what you should use, and we'll go into that later. So after that, you have your leader, and for trout fishing, the thing is, since they do like to fish, or they like to eat above the bottom floor of their aquatic habitat, is they're typically in areas where there's underwater growth, like vegetation. If it's in a big pond, heck, they'll probably be in vegetation even in a stream. So typically have it anywhere from half a foot to 4 feet. And some people just kind of, hi, Kathy B. Yeah. Hey, let me know your favorite 3 knots that you use. So the leader that I use, it's basically, a leader is just the amount of fishing line that's attached from the swivel to your fishing hook. So for me, I typically use 2.5 to 3 feet. That's just kind of my default. But then what happens is, if you're fishing in a pond and you're not catching any trout or anything like that, because you've got on your hook is a floating bait, whether it's power bait dough or you have a worm that you inflated with air with a needle. And so what you want to do is, as the bullet weight hits the bottom of the floor, you've got your leader going up, and it's floating anywhere from, even though it's a 3-foot leader, it won't go all the way up for 3 feet. It may be up like a 1.5 to 2 feet. There's a little bit of give, where it won't go all the way up, and that's just good height profile. Now, when you reel it in and you're waited for like 10-15 minutes, and you reel it back in to try another spot, and you get a lot of plant growth on your hook, that's because your leader is too short. The plant growth vegetation that's in the that's in that area that you cast, all the fish they're not going to find it within all that vegetation. It needs to be above that vegetation. So go for anywhere from half a foot to a foot longer. So if I have a 3-foot leader and I reel it in and I have this plant growth on my hook, I'm just going to take that out and put in like a 4-foot leader. I've even used 5-foot leaders. I mean, as long as my reach goes. I mean, and rather than bringing a ruler, just measure yourself. Like for me, from my fingertips to my elbow, that's about 2 feet. To right here, my right clavicle, that's about 3 feet. To my other clavicle, that's 4 feet. To my other elbow, that's is that 4 feet? Yeah. So I don't even bother bringing a ruler or anything like that. So you measure your leader length, just approximate, really. And that's how I approximate. I just use segmentations on my body to know exactly how long it's going to be. And so I've used 5 feet long leaders before, and it's worked. And for me, I am a very focused fisherman. I cast out far, I cast out medium, I cast out close, I try another side. I'm reading the top water. I'm reading the movement of the water. If it's a pond, a stream, whatever, I'm just seeing where there's just high elevation, where it goes really shallow, like it gets really steep. Could be an indicator where, hey, maybe steep going into the water. Typically where the water meets and kind of curves inward towards the body of the water. A lot of fish won't be out there, but in that corner area, because that's where it'll go from shallow to deep, and it'll be just kind of like a V shape, and a lot of good plant growth goes in there. There's usually different types of current flow that happens there, and a lot of fish just like to pass through those areas. So anytime there's like a little inlet and from the main land, just cast off in that on the tip of that island or that like peninsula, whatever you want to call it, is cast off in a corner, not straight ahead, but just in that corner, and you don't have to cast very far. So those are all the things those are kind of like testing the water or whatever. So that's something to think about. So Carolina rig is my number one type of setup, and you can cast it very far. Basically, the bullet weights that you use are 1/2 ounce. For far casting, hey, you can use 3/8 or you can use a 1/4 ounce bullet weight. If you don't really need to cast very far. So, I mean, the bigger the weight, the more expensive it is. So, hey, don't worry about it. And what I should end up doing in one of these types of talks, and I know no one's coming in. Hopefully someone comes in. I'll probably stop at the hour if no one comes in and call it a night. But if people come in, yeah, we'll extend it. So I'll probably show a couple of my equipment that I use for a lot of these riggings. But so the Carolina rig, it's good for floating bait that's on the hook, and I usually use a size 4 hook on trout, and it's a kind of like a bait holder / octopus / kind of weird. I have a specific type of hook that works every time on trout, whether or not you set the hook or not. I mean, even if I don't set the hook sets itself 9 times out of 10, and that's pretty good. But if I actually set the hook just a little bit lightly, even with that hook, it doesn't leave that trout's mouth. So trout can be really, really tricky as far as catching, but I've gotten down pretty good where if it's stock trout or trout in the stream, and I'm really dedicated about catching a trout for dinner, I will catch a trout, and usually I'll catch my limit. So it's not like a bragging thing. It's just I use these techniques and I'm sharing them with you, so hopefully you can use them. And if it doesn't work for you, and there's something different, like a little twist or something, a little slight change to how you do things, please let me know, because I would love to catch trout faster than I catch them. Sometimes it takes me a while, and sometimes I catch them like 3 trout in like 15 to 20 minutes, which is for most people, they're just like, what the heck? Because I love going fishing, and just people just like looking at me is like, what are you using? So they'll ask me about my setup and everything, and I'm glad to share with them. And basically what it is I just change things up. I want to think like a fish in some ways, but also it depends on the type of fish that I'm fishing for. So right now it's just kind of focused on trout, and Carolina rig works really well. I don't often use a bobber. I don't usually fish from the top water. I just cast it out, let it sink, let the bait float up, and I'm good. Now, if there are fish that you like to fish for that are just bottom feeders, you can use the same rig, Carolina rig, and it works great. Just don't have a floating bait at the end. And all the fish that look at the bottom, they'll just see the bait that's just kind of moving along at the bottom. You can maybe reel it in just slowly, or if you know that there's current, you can go ahead and let the current take it. So this is pretty much my number one rig for fishing, is my Carolina rig. The second rig that I use, hopefully I could find the name of it. A lot of these times I don't really use don't have names for it. So let's see, fishing rig types. There's ones where so this is another one that I use. I don't know the name of it. Let me drop rig, I think. All right, let me look. All right, drop shot rig, that's what it's called. Come on, move back. So drop shot rig is my number 2 rig that I like to use. It's very simple. I mean, Carolina rig is simple. Now this is where I like the Palomar knot comes in that you can use, or the other type of fishing knot that's really useful for this is the dropper loop knot. And this is actually better than a Palomar knot, but hey, you could use an elongated Palomar knot for the drop shot rig, or you can just use a T-swivel and attach it that way. So basically what it is, you got a sinker, and it's not a bullet weight. Basically, this is your main line. So looking at the right, sorry, it can be hard for you guys to see. And I need to make sure that I can, where is Firefox browser? I'll show capture cursor. All right, so come on, where'd you go? Sorry. Firefox, there you go. All right, so here you can see my cursor now. Sorry, I should use that in the beginning. So this is your main fishing line that's attached to your rod, to your reel, and then you have a swivel. Now, if you have a T swivel, it's basically a 3-way swivel, and it's very useful, and I would use that, and you would just attach your hook coming out this way. I usually use anywhere from a 3-inch to a 6 inches of line that hangs off of it. Basically, as long as it's no more than halfway to the sinker, that's pretty much the length that I typically use. Now I have variations of this, and I'll go over the variation right after. But so basically, you can use your Palomar knot or the dropper loop knot over for the here, and this one is using the dropper loop. And then a hook, have it face up. It's not that important if it's not facing up, but if you can have it facing up, that's a little bit better. Then you've got your leader line, and if the leader line, so a lot of fish, I would say if you're fishing for trout and you're fishing for fish that feed off the bottom, 6 inches from here to there, or maybe a foot, isn't bad. The thing is, when you're fishing, most of the time you're not going to be fishing on a boat. You're going to be fishing from the bank like me. And the thing is, this isn't going to be vertical. It's going to be more of diagonal. So just note that while if this is 6 inches from top to bottom, you're going to be fishing from the bank. So it's going to be, if you have a very tight line, you're going to be almost 45 degrees. So if you've got 6 inches, your bait is pretty much at the bottom, 3 inches above the water. Now, if you've got a leader that's 1 foot, and of course your loop goes down 6 inches, so you got to hang in at least 6 inches from the bottom, maybe 4 to 6 inches, just because that tight line is at an angle. Like I typically will have longer leader lines if I'm fishing from the bank, and I actually don't have it as a foot. I typically use a foot and a half to 2 feet of leader, and then I use this 6 inches, just halfway of that. So it could be anywhere from a foot and a half. So I try not to tell people to use so much 6 inches, 3 inches, 9 inches, a foot and a half. It's gonna have to be very depending on the situation. Now the sinker, you can use different types. I use something that's called, it's natural. It's ½ ounce to an ounce. And if you're going to use this in saltwater fishing, use heavier sinkers based on the tide and the amount of inflow and outflow. because it's gonna take it. But basically, I don't saltwater fish too much because now I'm in the middle of Nebraska, so it's all freshwater fishing. Excuse me. But I don't use sinkers that's more than half an ounce, really. So, I mean, if you've got half an ounce sinker, you're pretty much good. You don't have to worry about getting anything heavier. Some people just use really heavy sinkers. I don't know why, but that's also prone to getting just stuck on something or breaking your line if you're reeling in, because that just adds extra weight to your line. The lighter your line, the less chances the fish is going to see your line and get spooked by it. So, and we're going to talk about that later. Now, for certain situations, and in a lot of states, they allow 2 hooks per line. So if you have, and certain states allow 2 fishing rods to use at once with 2 lines on each, 2 fishing hooks on each. So if you want to maximize your chances of catching fish, have 2 fishing rods and have 2 hooks on each line. Now, you can have 2 hooks, the dropper loops or Palomar hooks coming out, but they get tangled a lot and it's a pain in the butt. So what I end up doing is I have like a lure here at the bottom, and it's just one of those heavier sinking type of lures. There's one specifically that I like, if I can remember the name, but it works great. Have it near the bottom, and if you're basically, what you do is, if you know that there's a current at the bottom of the pond or lake or whatever, you can let the current pretty much drag that sinker along the bottom and create movement, and then the fish will be attracted to it and go for it. Or if there isn't any, what you do is you just reel it in, basically a little bit. That's about the speed that I go. And a fish, as you're reeling it in, a fish might follow it and bite on it. Sometimes they won't see it at the very bottom. They'll actually see the second hook that's up there. So I use the same drop shot rig, but I use a lure at the bottom, and then I use some type of worm or live bait at the top, or I'll use a minnow on the top one, and then on bottom just hard lure. Why I hate using lures is because they're so expensive. Like, if you get good lures, a lure is typically anywhere from $4 to like $15. And if you get snagged, you just lost $4 or $4 to $15. But what I loved in Walden Pond over in Massachusetts, and there's just a lot of clean streams and ponds and lakes over in Massachusetts, which I really liked. You can go swimming, you can go snorkeling. What I typically find, or if I go snorkeling in some of these waters, if I go diving at the bottom and there's just like trunks and just rocks, is you're just gonna find lures after lures after lures. So you can just find like $100 to $200 worth of lures if you just go snorkeling next to these swimming areas. In Nebraska, the waters are not very clean. I wouldn't swim in any pond they stock trout or walleye or whatever. The only place that I would actually go in the water and swim are ones that are fed by a spring. And there's an artesian spring out in Royal, Nebraska. Water is very clean. I would swim in that. But I don't use these lures. Now, it's different when you're fishing in a pond in a lake than it is fishing in a stream. And in a stream, all I do is, some people will use these little weights attached to the line to make the line sink faster. I don't even use that. Just put a sized hook, and usually it's a size 4 hook, on the end of your line, put a nice fat juicy worm, and let the current drift it. Don't put any air in the worm. Just let it sink naturally. So the worm will just kind of go like this. The current goes to where you want it to go, and then you've got yourself a good trout. And at this point, it's eight minutes to the hour, so I may stop unless someone comes in and wants to talk. And that's why I have this set up, because talking about fishing. Oh, come on, stupid flies only like to get in the water. I think next week what I'll probably focus on a lot is just the effects of, I don't know, industrialization or agricultural farming has affected fishing in so many ways that it's horrible. If someone wants to come in and we can talk about that. If not, I'm just going to show a couple of videos of techniques. Now, what I use as far as the weight of my leader, I use a 4-pound test, but I've been testing, like 4-pound test is good if you want to catch up to like 16-inch, maybe more trout, and 16 to 20 inches, I would say, is a 4-pound test is fine. I think the bigger the fish, especially trout, and the smaller size weight, like a fluorocarbon 4-pound test line, they're gonna have a hard time seeing. 6 pounds has worked well. 8 pounds, you're getting to that line where they might see it and they're gonna get freaked out and they may not bite ever that day. So I'd say 6-pound test is probably perfect, especially for beginners. 4-pound test is definitely good. And once you get experience, like my brother, he fishes with 2-pound test and he catches some big trout, like 21 inch trout with 2-pound test on his fly fishing rod. So I mean, yeah, 4-pound is safe. 6-pound is probably the max. 8-pound is you might lose some fish from biting by using that heavy of a line. So now, if you're, and again, freshwater fishing, when you're out in saltwater fishing, there's just so many sharp rocks, so many things that you don't realize, so many fish with sharp teeth. You're going to want to use something really strong, anywhere from 10 to 20 to 30 to even 60-pound test, and maybe even higher. But I would say if you're going to go fishing, start out freshwater fishing, because it's a lot easier than saltwater fishing in certain ways. I mean, saltwater fishing, freshwater fishing are pretty much similar. It's just the type of fish that you want to catch. You can figure it out. Freshwater fishing. Saltwater fishing, you don't know. You're pretty much throwing it in the water, seeing what you catch, seeing if it's edible, and identifying it, and whether or not you can take it home, eat it or not, or if it's poisonous, whatever. You don't have to really worry about that with freshwater fishing. Okay, so I'm getting set up for a few minutes of videos. And they're not edited, unfortunately, so I may have to go through it before I show you. And again, I've got so many hours of fishing. I want to show one where I'm fishing on a creek in Royal. Actually, my last fishing video is a good one, so I might just do that one. Let's see. Let's go to YouTube. My channel. Videos. Alright. It's not ordered, is it? guess. Let me use Royal. I think. Dang it. What was that name? Vertigray. I think. There we go. It's one that most people probably have seen it before. So, as you're watching this, basically what I'm doing is I'm not using anything other than a fishing hook attached to the end of my main line. It's a size 4 fishing hook, and I've just got a Canadian night crawler attached to the end of it. And I just let it go into an area. Like, if you see here, see that top left? See underneath? So there are some plants. Their leaves just kind of go over the water. Now, if it can get deep enough, or sometimes it doesn't even have to be deep, trout are just there. They could be there. I mean, you don't know till you try it out. So what I do is I drift that worm, let the stream just take it under wherever, and see if a trout bites on it. And that's typically what happens. So I don't even cast it. I just let it drop. I don't even tighten my line. I just let the current take it. And I know, now this is only if you're going to catch what you eat. Because you have a big chance of hooking it in the throat or in the stomach. So I kept my eye on the line. Now, when you have the line loose like that, you have to keep good eye on it. If you see the line move fast or move differently or move in a different direction, most likely you've got a fish. There's no other indicator to know that you got a fish on the line other than that. So that's how you have to pay attention. So in this instance, I'm looking at that loose line as the worm is going. And the good thing about water like this, it's just so clear. You can see that worm. Sometimes you can even see the fish as it's going after it. And I realized I've only got so that one got it right in the cheek. Now I'd have to go and I think this full video is on LBRY. So let's see if I can see the video here. It should have it all set, I think. Here we go. 2 months ago. Alright. Scott, I have to wait. Eagle plane anchor. Gotta go deep sea fishing in Channel Islands. Your arm will get tired from reeling in so many fish. Yeah, I've had that happen. Saltwater fishing and fly fishing on a rowboat in Washington State. It's I've even had it with just normal bank fishing on a pond. It's just so much fish. My arm just gets tired. All right, so let's see if it can find it. It's taking a while. Let's see. Direct link. Will it be there? Probably not. All right, so it's on the hour. I lost call. Anyone who wants to come on in to talk about anything fishing, come on in. All right, so that one isn't there. Just what I wanted to do was make a full new intro video, but I think I'll skip it. I just didn't have enough time for it. I was wondering what topic I should do today. I think what I'll do for next week is I'll probably prepare uh at least 3 videos. You know, I could do more. So 3 videos just kind of displaying technique, what I did, what rigging I used, what was my setup, and what is my thought process? Why did I choose that spot for fishing? What am I fishing for? Basically, giving you a good breakdown of what I'm doing, how I'm thinking, etc. And I could choose a lot of videos for it, so it's not that bad. That's it, really. I mean, I hope you enjoyed it. I mean, a lot of this is just very beginner stuff, but again, just kind of giving you a very beginner outlook so you're not overwhelmed. I think there's so many people that try to learn fishing. They go out day in, day out. They don't catch anything. They bought a lot of equipment. And again, people keep asking me, hey, what rod are you using? What reel are you using? For a lot of this stuff, I'm actually using those combo reels you buy at the store that are really cheap. The only thing that I actually spend money on are the bullet weights, the hooks, and then typically I just use Canadian night crawlers and I keep them in my fridge. And again, I could probably go over how to take care of Canadian night crawlers. But there are already a lot of videos on that. But again, fishing talk, we can just talk about it. And that's kind of it. So, like my first fishing rod that I bought 7 years ago. Yeah, it was my first fishing rod that I ever bought. In this small shop in just north of Somerville, Massachusetts. It was along the lines of I think $20. It was like a 5.5 foot rod or 6 foot. It was kind of a short rod. It was a light. It's not like ultralight. It was just a light rod. And this reel, so it was this cheap $20 rod and reel. The rod actually broke, but I think I still have it. I caught the most fish on that rod than any other rod that I have, and I've gotten to the point where a few years ago, this is of course where I was making a lot of money. I have like rods that are upwards of $200. But again, all my rods that I use for trout fishing. Ultralight rods that are no more than $20. I think 15 at the most. And one time I ordered one and I got like 12 of those $15 to $20 fishing rods and just kind of gave them out to a couple people. But that's all I use. I don't need to use like a super nice fishing rod for trout fishing. Now, when you want to catch the heavier, bigger fish that give you a fight and typically aren't good eating, yeah, you might want to spend more on a nicer rod. But for me, when I go out and fish, it's usually to eat the fish for my family and just to test out whether my family liked that type of fish. All right, so that's it for tonight. I hope you enjoyed. And tomorrow night, we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of stuff that's probably going to depress you, but, look on the bright side of things. And Friday night's politics type of live stream. Even though I'm not in politics or care about it, I just talk about it, I guess. Thank you for coming in, everybody who's watching. You 4 people out there. And I'll see you another night.